evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Digital June 2021. This is the second day of the conference. I hope you attended yesterday. We had two sessions. One session was the keynote opening conversation session. There also we talked about the broad overview of digital economy in India. And then after that, we went on to the second session where we discussed how do you enter into digital economy in India. And we looked at various investment structures, M&A issues. We also looked at competition law issues, which are becoming very important right now. Even this big tech are facing antitrust issues. Today we have a very interesting two sessions. This, what I believe, is the heart of digital economy, especially in terms of the key issues that are there. The first session is on platforms, OTT platforms, and regulatory issues involved with all those different platforms or business models in digital economy. And the second session is on data protection, data privacy, data security issues. Again, digital economy is driven by data, and everything has to do with the data. Who is allowed to use the data? Who is allowed to store the data? All those interesting issues. How do you protect data will be coming up in the second session. So, thank you for joining us today. We have received tremendous response with this conference. Almost 1,200, I believe. Last check, 1,200 plus people have registered for this conference. So thank you for your interest in joining us. As we look at today's session, let me share my screen and just introduce you to the panel in today's session. The first session is on regulatory consideration in various business models. It is chaired by Vivek Katpalia, who is the leader of M&A and education practice at Nishit Desai Associates. He also is the head of our Singapore office. And we have four experts joining this discussion. Gauri Gokhale, she is a leader of IP, TMT, and data protection practice at Nishit Desai Associates. Huzaifa Tamawala, I believe he has some emergency and not sure he's here at the moment, but he will be joining soon, if not now. He is the head of our disruptive technology practice, which looks at different, IR4 practices. Industrial Revolution 4, 5G and AR, VR and drone and autonomous car and robotics and AI and all of that. And then we also have Mr. Tarun Katyal. He's an investor and founder of MediaTek and EduTech. And he is with Serendipity MediaTek. And also we have Mr. Rakesh Maheshwari. He's the senior director and group coordinator of cyber law and security with the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, or MeitY. Now, these speakers have joined in their own personal capacity. So the views they are presenting at this conference are their personal. They are not necessarily of the organization for which they work. So kindly bear that in mind. There are several organizations who have supported this conference and made it possible. They include, I would like to take the opportunity to thank them. They include Center for Digital Future, CUTS International, FICCI, IAMAI, IFA, IVCA, NASSCOM, Thai Silicon Valley, US India Business Council, and the Wilson Center. In addition, Brand Capital International, which is the strategic arm of the Times Group, has also joined in as a media partner for this event. So with that, I hand over to Vivek to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mihir, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon. A very late evening for me here in Singapore. And I'm very pleased to have the speakers on our panel, whom Mihir just introduced. The topic is really quite fascinating, and we are very lucky to have, apart from my colleagues at Nishit Desai Associates, we are very lucky to have a regulator, Mr. Maheshwari, as well as someone from the industry, Tarun, joining us. The way we have split this session up, we don't have any presentations, but we're going to ask certain questions, and then the flow will continue. Please feel to send us your questions in the question bank, and I will deal with relevant questions at the appropriate time. We'll touch upon the intermediary guidelines and the digital media ethics rules 2021 first. And as you all know, these rules that have recently been promulgated by the government of India have has created a lot of buzz in all forms. And currently, all types of technology companies doing business in India are trying to understand these rules, trying to figure out how to comply with them, and also to try and better understand the philosophy behind these rules. And the second topic, after we are done with intermediary rules and the digital media ethics rules, and it's connected because the digital media ethics rules also touch OTT. We'll touch upon OTT, and lastly, we'll talk about e-commerce and some of the emerging business models in e-commerce. So that's how I've tried to split the questions, at least, to the various speakers. So let me start first with you, Mr. Maheshwari. Thank you again for your time in joining us. And when we talk about the intermediary guidelines, I think one of the questions that comes to the top of everyone's mind is to try and understand a little bit about the evolution of the guidelines, and from the ministry and the government's perspective, what they really aim to address. So maybe if you can give us some insights into the regulatory journey of these guidelines.
Yeah, so thank you, Vivek, and thank you for inviting me in this prestigious webinar. So first of all, let me convey that the intermediary rules are per se not new. The rules already existed since 2011, covered the whole lot of intermediaries, but since then, the whole ecosystem of intermediary has changed. Social media, outreach of people to use social media has increased tremendously. And along with the use of the social media, the misuse, because government role comes when there is a possible misuse and abuse of an ecosystem. And in this particular context, the intermediaries, and particularly the social media intermediaries, the significant social media intermediaries. So the need has been felt, courtesy the events which have happened. To begin with, on 26th of July 2018, our Honorable Minister made a statement during a call-out motion in Parliament about the increase in accountability of the social media platform because of their possible misuse. In fact, certain lynching incidents had happened during that period. In December 2018, Honorable Supreme Court, while hearing in Prajula suo moto criminal case, which was also relating to the safety and security of children and women on internet, it observed that somehow these tech companies, particularly the social media companies, need to curb the availability of such obscene means. It was in the context of child sexual abuse and some rape, gang rape videos which were otherwise floating on the internet, and courtesy which the suo moto criminal action, criminal petition was taken up. In fact, there was another case wherein the social media platforms were made party. It was running in the High Court of Chennai. Hello. Later on, moved to Supreme Court, so which is known as Facebook transfer petition case, wherein we were asked to. In fact, we were given a deadline that by January 2020, we should be out with our new intermediary rules, given the way today's intermediaries and platform operate. Of course, there are other number of other cases as well, but all of them relate to safety, security of users, particularly children and women. And it is therefore, it was the major objective of these rules that these things are taken care of. Of course, with the change of technology and the ability of the platforms being able to react fast, that certain timelines have also been given. And therefore, we have, in a way, come up with two sets of rules. One, which apply to all the intermediaries, and second, which not only apply to social media platform, but also are applicable to significant social media platform. The rules also give a flexibility to government that in case there is proportional to the risk available, maybe if there is any intermediary which is also considered to be, I mean, from a risk perspective, quite significant, then government has got the ability to notify that particular intermediary and ask for certain obligations. So that was the context. Of course, maybe, I mean, as the requirement comes up, I'll talk about as to what are the distinct features in the rules, but presently I'm not touching them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maheshwari. So I think a couple of things I take away from your opening response is that there was obviously we had the earlier set of intermediary rules from 2011, but because of certain developments in the social media space, in society in general, and also as a result of these cases that went to the courts, there was a need, a direction, and also the feeling that from a misuse perspective, there was a need to come out with a newer set of guidelines. And the other point I take away is the emphasis on significant social media intermediaries. I think that's one of the key areas which has created a lot of buzz as far as these rules are concerned. Before I come to Tarun, I just wanted to follow up with one more question for you, Mr. Maheshwari. How have you seen? We've read a lot about these rules in the media and in the press, and the compliance aspects of it. I know that there are timelines being provided, and it's quite flexible, I must say, as far as by when these rules need to be applied. How flexible is the government in looking at? And again, this is just I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how flexible are you in looking at trying to address some of the genuine concerns that industry would have with respect to, let's say, implementation, not really the substance of the rules, but more with the implementation?
Yeah. So first of all, we do expect that certain frameworks requirements, particularly for the significant social media platforms, which do require a resident grievance officer, a nodal contact officer, and a chief compliance officer to be stationed in India, to be available in India. So the word is for the resident in all of them. And we also expect them to have a local presence by virtue of a physical contact address here. So all this is meant to see that maybe the difference between the so-called Indian entity and the Inc. or LLC entity, that entity from a government perspective, because we do receive a lot of grievances as well. I mean, being the ministry which is the custodian of the IT Act, and we realize that this is something which is otherwise essential, and to that extent, this is where our initial focus is as soon as these guidelines, these rules have come into operation. Over a period of time, maybe towards the end of June this month, we will expect them to have the first compliance report to be published by them on their platforms. Other activities, we are also in the process of working with an FAQ to provide a clarity on maybe on certain aspects as to whether a particular platform will become a social media or not. There had been some certain confusion, so we are also working along with them. We are also trying to work some standard operating procedures so as to ensure consistency of operations, because the rules will be in a way operated by law enforcement agencies, by other appropriate government and other agencies of the government, as well as users. So we have therefore tried to see that maybe from all perspectives, whether you are a user or whether you are a part of the law enforcement agencies or any other government, or whether you are a platform, that the consistency across by all the stakeholders does remain, and that there is no abuse, or in fact a balanced view is taken, is what is our next focus as of now. I believe that as the time progresses, the stability will come, because there are certain technical, there are certain process related changes, there are certain HR related aspects. So we also can't expect that things will change overnight. But I'm sure once the governance framework is available in place, hopefully in time to come, these things will also be sorted out, and the compliance should grow as we move along.
No, that's very helpful, Mr. Maheshwari. So I think it's important that at least the industry, the platforms, and even the government and law enforcement agencies, etc., keep in mind that there could be there are bound to be certain hiccups and hurdles, teething troubles, and as long as both sides keep an open mind in trying to fix it till, as you rightly said, the balance is met, I think that would be a good approach, for everybody. So I'm glad to hear that, and thank you for those comments. Tarun, if I could jump to you, you heard Mr. Maheshwari give a very lucid explanation about the current guidelines. These are obviously intermediary, as well as they also cover the digital media ethics rules, which would cover OTT, etc. From your vantage point in the industry, how have you seen the industry react to these guidelines? And I'll have a follow-up question to you also in relation to your own. I believe you have launched or about to launch an intermediary platform yourself, or an app. So maybe you give us some insight into the industry's views and how you are seeing all this.
So really, my view of the industry and my own view is kind of similar. But let me first congratulate Mr. Maheshwari of taking the first step on clarifying what the government intends to do. I think the biggest problem is having translucency, right? When we don't have the clarity on what the government expects from us, everybody makes their own assumptions. People take extreme stands, and the intent behind the action gets kind of lost, right? You've made your intent very clear, which is very good, which is to protect children, women, to be able to protect from pornography, to be able to have a mechanism and a clear, well articulated mechanism for grievances, for making sure that, organizations who are out there calling themselves social media invest in the basics of having a grievance officer. And so this mechanism is really good, because it will take away the pain, it will take away what the courts have to deal with, because we don't have grievance officers, because there is no clarity on what is right and wrong, and because there is really a certain sense of, I would say, judgment or error of judgment on most individual parties to decide what works or doesn't. Now, let me come to what is raising skepticism, right? And what is raising a certain amount of challenges in people's minds, right? And that really emanates from, where do you draw the line of the government telling you what to bring down or take down on content, right? We all agree that we must take down pornography. We all agree we must take down anything that, invades people's privacy. We all agree that we must take down anything around kids and women and so on and so forth. But when it starts to become borderline, gray on whether we are impeding on free speech, whether we are trying to take down political opponents and their ability to be able to reach out or communicate, whether it becomes a challenge on contrarian, a contrarian narrative that the society wants. I think that's where the challenge comes in, right? Right. are we being policed around the kind of narrative that the government should or shouldn't want? And I think the Supreme Court, in its recent judgment, also has been fairly vocal about the fact that either journalists or free speech shouldn't be impeded. And my request to the government will always be, whether it's on the OTT long form narrative side or on the intermediary social side, is to step with a lot of caution, especially in the early days, on what they ask social media platforms to take down. Because the world, as well as you know, the creators, as well as, people like the Editors Guild and others, are watching us very, very closely. And this entire mechanism, which is very, very required today, will be questioned, or which will come up under a cloud, or will go to courts if we are starting to cross that line of political free speech. And that would be my only request. That would be my only viewpoint. That would be my only thing that, really makes me worried or makes me skeptical. And the community largely starting to wonder where we are going with this.
No, that's it's an interesting perspective, and thanks for that, Tarun. And in your own your point is
So
yes,
right.
go
I'm
ahead.
an advisor onto a very good global platform that's entering India.
Yes.
And while we are putting the entire, mechanism together, our worry is that where should content moderation go? What and how should we moderate, right? And that's a question we don't want to answer for our users. We don't want the users to feel that we are a platform that moderates free speech, right? We definitely want to moderate porn. We definitely want to moderate anything that is, even a borderline explicit. But we don't want to be the moral gatekeeper of free speech in the country.
Yeah.
The point well taken.
So,
And Mr. Maheshwari, do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, Mr. Vivek. So thank you for bringing your apprehensions, and let me, convey, because the ministry is empowered to act under 69A as of today. I, being the designated officer till about 6 months back, I have at least worked for 4 years being the designated officer for 69A, and therefore a lot of blockings on the social media platform. Let me just maybe assure that the way the whole system, at least under 69A, which is of course related to sovereignty and integrity, defense of India, security of the state, public order, and one more ground relatable to any one of them, cognizable offense related to any one of them. So the grounds are limited, but the way it operates has got a lot of check and balances. A prior notice, in most of the cases, 48 hours plus notice. The intermediary platform or a website, where the content is being requested to be taken down, is called, they participate in the meeting. It is an interministerial committee of joint secretaries, 5 joint secretaries, who finally take the call, finally approved by secretary. So the process is tough. The process has already got its check and balances. Of course, when we come to the intermediary side, those check balances probably are not there. And to that extent, this is not an order. It is just a notice. The intermediaries are also free not to take down if they think the request from the government or the appropriate agencies or maybe even users is not really worth it. Yes, there is an overhead to that an account, because then they have to, the decision capability is being passed on to the intermediary and they become liable in case their decision goes wrong. But to ensure that only that we are talking of, particularly for the significant social media platforms, the concept of nodal officer and concept of the chief compliance officer, so that the issues, the differences, if any, are sorted out rather than the government is forcing or the platforms are doing that way. I hope your point is well taken. Things will evolve, and things should evolve for a positive and a vibrant economy, a vibrant social media ecosystem.
No, I agree with you, Mr. Maheshwari, and I think that the attempt of getting accountability on our side is very welcome. I've always been, and Gauri and me have worked very closely, even on the long form content, the original content side. And I've always believed that having nodal officers, having grievance officers, taking in people's views is very important. But like you're insisting on the long form side, maybe a third party representation, whether it's a judicial representation, whether it's a civil society representation, on taking some of these decisions of takedown would be more welcome, because it will give a sense of fairness to the players at large, that this isn't a one-way government order, but it is like what happens with ASCII, lot like what happens with BCCC, or like what's being planned with the original OCP, the original content producers. If even on the intermediary side, we create a diverse panel of individuals who come from various backgrounds, it will just give all players a certain amount of assurance that this isn't, any government of today or government of tomorrow trying to push their agenda.
Right. Thank you so much. I think that discussion was very, very fruitful. We heard both sides of the spectrum, if one could put it that way, the industry as well as the government. And before I move on to the next subtopic, Gauri, I can't leave you out of this. When Mr. Maheshwari talked about takedowns, only thing I could think of was you. I know you do a lot of work to help clients decide. And Mr. Maheshwari, I'm sure you know about this, whether things should be taken down or not. So what kind of lens do you use, Gauri, when you're looking at takedown requests that your clients get?
Sure, thanks, Vivek. I'll answer that question, and I'll just comment on, what both Mr. Maheshwari and Tarun have said, if you allow me, maybe for a minute or so.
Absolutely.
So I think what I've realized, after all these years of when we look at the content which is objected, right? We cannot look at that context in isolation, right? There is always a certain context in which we have to view that content. So when we look at any piece of content, whether or not that piece itself, when you look at it, you may not find that necessarily objectionable, right? However, when you look at in the context, so suppose in a particular area, riots have taken place, right? And in some content is relating to that area, then it is the judgment of the government whether a public order issue will be caused because of that. Some additional, issues may be sort of aggravated in that particular area, right? And India being such a diverse country, I think that is one particular, aspect that we need to realize, that we sitting in Mumbai may not be able to realize the nuances of issues that will arise in a particular jurisdiction where the issues are, are taking place, right? So we just have to like one takeaway, what I've learned is, to put it very simply, understand the context in which the objection is being taken. If you believe in that context also the content is not objectionable, then you may give that feedback. But you can't look at the content in isolation. So that is one takeaway. And the other thing, for what both Tarun and Mr. Maheshwari said about, of this grievance officer, or whether it is nodal officer, or even, a chief compliance officer, I think what I heard from both of them is there has to be a dialogue. These officers are meant to have a dialogue, and it's not as if just taken and, just wonder what to do about it, right? I mean, whichever orders they are. So I think that is one, if at all the platforms take that into consideration and have more dialogue, I'm sure Mr. Maheshwari, your office will be open for that kind of dialogue to develop, systems where things can be, streamlined. And talking about streamlining, I think I take that point very well, that what we realize that 69A, okay, there is a particular process, but again, India being such a vast country, when you have multiple regulators, whether it is within, even, forget the central, but even at the state level, and then you have law enforcement across the country, if there is no consistency in their, implementation of the law, that creates the apprehension that Tarun mentioned. So it is not the law itself that may be necessarily creating issues, it's the implementation, and that too inconsistent implementation, that is what is creating perceptional issues also at times, right? So what we really need is amazing, like total awareness. And here, Tarun, I would request you, if your industry can work with the ministry to create, simple videos explaining, what is really objectionable, right? So how do you apply your mind to that and help the law enforcement agencies to understand this English of the rules in a simpler way so that they're able to implement consistently? Once you have that clarity, you will see amazing changes being, in terms of, the way things will develop for the social media or overall for the internet, right? And the last thing, coming to the awareness, I feel we are losing or missing a one big stakeholder in this ecosystem is the users themselves. Who is going to bring that accountability in the, for the users, and what can we do? And this is a question maybe, even for the audience, for, for that matter, as to how we can bring out more accountability on the user side, because as we know that it's not as if a criminal sanction or otherwise is going to really make a difference. People will just come, tweet something, go away, but they are not realizing, the impact of that particular tweet, right? Or maybe even a other post on the other social media platforms. So I really want, more discussion on that front, as how we can create more accountability on the user side. I know I went on a little longish, but this subject is really close to my heart, so I thought I'll bring it up.
No, I think those are excellent points, Gauri, and I think this topic itself has taken almost 30 minutes, but I think it's very, very important. And I think before I jump to OTT, one a concluding thought that I have from all of you is basically that there should be dialogue, there should be regulatory certainty, and there should be awareness in the regulations, as well as Gauri pointed out, in the implementation. I think a lot of things fall through the cracks when implementation is inconsistent, and also with respect to maybe FAQs, clarifications. Nobody can get it right the first time. So it'll be wrong for anyone to say that any government regulation is should be perfect. It should evolve with time, and I think as long as there's that dialogue, I think it'll work. And also with the whole grievance mechanism that has been set out, hopefully, as Mr. Maheshwari pointed out, it will reduce the burden on the courts. I just hope that it doesn't go in the opposite direction, where if there is a lack of regulatory certainty, or if there is inconsistent implementation, that the burden on the courts just increases, because people are just not able to come to grips with requests that are made, and positions that industry takes. So I think that's a very, very helpful discussion. I'm going to now switch gears, since I have three subtopics to cover. The second one is slightly related, so it's not going to be completely off of what we've been discussing, and it's on OTT. Again, the same set of rules obviously do apply, where you have the digital media ethic rules, you have your different levels of compliance and self-regulatory mechanisms that have been built in. But before I come to some of the regulatory aspects, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the business landscape for OTT. Tarun, if I may ask you, we have so many OTT players in India, domestic, international, and obviously with the rising middle class, with increasing penetration of the internet, it's a no-brainer that everyone is looking at the market and how to monetize it. Is there a market for everyone? And where do you see the growth? And what does it mean for international OTT versus domestic OTT?
So, Vivek, there's always room if you're well differentiated. There is always room if you've thought through your strategy to be able to position yourself to be relevant in the lives of your users. Now, there are international OTT players, there are local OTT players. Local OTT players emanate from broadcasters in the country mostly, and there are some few independent ones. There was a time when we all asked the same question around broadcast television, where the number of broadcast channels had become so huge that you wondered whether there was a need for so many, and so on and so forth. But over a period of time, some went away, some grew bigger, and some just found their own balance, right? And from a time where we had 6 or 7 or 8 GEC networks, there was INX, there was Imagine, there was Colors, there was so many. We came down to a few which survived and did very well. I think the same will happen in the OTT world, though I do believe that it's very early days in the OTT side. OTT has actually been able to price themselves much better. So the number of OTT players that a consumer will possibly keep will be more than even television. And why do I say this? It's because a lot of the intermediary money that used to get lost is now straight to the content creator stroke the platform. So the role of the cable operator, the role of the MSO, LCO, so on and so forth, kind of gets reduced in the direct to consumer environment that OTT plays in. And that's why if you see today, even Hotstar or Z5 or some of the big OTT players are able to provide an annual membership for as low as 400 rupees. And even Prime, which is at the top end, which also has shopping, shipping, and others, is only at about 1,000 rupees. And if you total out all the good OTT platforms, the broadcasters as well as the international ones, your annual bill will not get to more than 300 rupees a month, right, outside of Netflix, which is not too much considering what people have been paying for cable television already for many, many years. So from a user perspective, I'm not sure whether their ability to pay for OTT has been maxed out.
Right.
As long as they get good content, as long as their needs for content are fulfilled, people are looking for diversity. People are looking for the convenience of video on demand. People are looking for variety, which inherently on television can't be provided because it has to either cater to one audience or largely now has to cater to the lowest common denominator to be able to build the GRP war, right? Also, the growth in digital AdX, all reports indicate that in the next couple of years, you will actually have digital equal to TV or even overtaking television. And it has already overtaken print. Also supports video streaming, and video streaming and video advertising is the largest component on the digital AdX piece. On top of that, I think the growth of video and social commerce will also aid to the profitability in the business metrics of OTT versus, and video streaming players. You've seen what Netflix is already doing around the Netflix store and increasingly frictionless journeys of completing commerce within streaming platforms, within vertical video, short video platforms is very, very apparent across the world. And we're seeing good user adoption. In line with user adoption to e-commerce, there is a lot of user adoption to video and social commerce. So the streams of revenue are also multiple and diverse rather than where television, where it was restricted to advertising and subscription. You have advertising, you have subscription, you have influencer marketplace, you have content and sponsored and recommended content. You have peer-to-peer, which has already come in on YouTube and Patreon models. You also have, like I told you, the models on video and social commerce. And now increasingly, we are also seeing monetization of content through crypto and NFTs globally. So it's a very, very dynamic space. It's also moving very fast and very quickly. And for everybody who can keep pace with the technological changes, you will have a long runway on monetization and building businesses in the streaming space. I hope that helped, and I know it was a little.
No, absolutely. That gives us a lot of food for thought. And from a market, India obviously is many micro markets. So when you talk about OTT, what comes to your mind first as a someone from the industry? Are you looking at the population in the cities? How are you looking at tier 2, tier 3? What are the differences that you see from a landscape perspective there?
And I want to start something very different, Vivek.
Please.
That as a market, India is one of the few markets that is available for global players to target at scale.
Yes.
China, you know, is a challenged market, right? And Russia too is a challenged market. So that really leaves India, where you can get to 1 billion users, 1 billion internet users, as one big market outside of the US, and some few markets in LATAM like Brazil and the others. But there isn't a market like India available for internet companies in the world. So that's one part. Within that, I think everybody is trying to take their own course. I think the good part is that telcos, after their consolidation, have made an effort and a significant effort to take a 4G penetration, both in device as well as in bandwidth usage, down to tier 3 and tier 4 in rural. And we've seen even the Geo feature phone that supports a video has been a really good uh, innovation, I would call, in the world, on where video streaming has now reached to the lowest common denominator. So it really, you can play different content strategies, you can play different audience strategies, and you can appeal to different cohorts and different segments. So you don't really essentially have to worry about bandwidth availability. So I will only do metros. That was about 5 years ago. But today, all that has really gone down to many tiers. There are over 40-50 million geophone users itself, reported users, and I think even more than that. So your ability to reach out to the lowest common denominator is much higher, to be able to penetrate many demographics and geographic segments is much higher. And so you have the choice, basis your content strategy, basis your user strategy, to pick the audience and go after it.
Wonderful. So I mean, it's a fertile market as long as you're well differentiated. I think that was very well put. Gauri, I've just got a question, and I'm going to ask you some regulatory aspects relating to OTT. But the question is very interesting, and it also touches about international OTT in India. Without naming the OTT players, there have been recent actions under the regulations against content producers, directors, etc., right? Whether it's in court or just regulatory actions. Does this create an environment which makes it difficult, or makes international OTT players look to other markets and feel that the risk of doing business in India is too high? And how does the regulatory environment, especially with the new digital media ethic rules, online curated content, etc., play into all of this?
Sure. So I think, each industry goes with this, little up and down, right? And I think Tarun and I have discussed this before also. So we are at that, that juncture where things are, somewhat shaky in some quarters, insofar as the nature of content, etc., is concerned, right? But I think so long as the government, and I have had a chance to also be part of some of the roundtables conducted by the Ministry of I&B, which is going to be the regulator for the OTT, right, going forward since last November. At least what I'm hearing is that, everybody has been saying we are respecting freedom of speech and expression. Now there is a lot of subjectivity when we say respect freedom of speech and expression also. I recognize that. But at least the communication is very clear that they want to recognize that. Now let us understand where is the problem coming from. In many, many times you have seen the recent FIRs and all of that. Most of the times you will see that it is coming from, say, some political, some local political party, whatever, player or otherwise, right? So you will see that it is not necessarily starting from the regulator, the issue. It is coming from other quarters, and then it gets escalated, right? Of course, there are some, some situations where even the government is raising issues, right? But what I'm really hoping with this OTT regulations that have been put in place, and what I'm hearing is that the government expects platform accountability. When I say accountability, also responsibility, they have to take it in their own hands, because that is the first tier, right? Then you have the second tier, that also is self-regulation, right? Which is their own self-regulatory body, of course, headed by some eminent, ex-High Court judge or a Supreme Court or some legal luminary, right? And then the last resort is the ministry. My only hope is that this particular mechanism is actually availed by those who are objecting to the content, and they don't run to court all the time, right? If there is a mechanism being made available, please use that mechanism. Don't rush to the court, don't rush for filing FIRs, because what you're ultimately doing in FIR, you're not getting an injunction or anything, you're not getting a determination. You're simply creating harassment for the officers of the company. If that is your intention, then nobody can really help, right? But the intention is to sort of address the content related issues, then you do have this mechanism. So I hope that those who are those who are today filing FIRs or today raising objections use this particular mechanism to get the redressal of the complaint. And I hope that this entire mechanism, which is still being put in place, because of course it will take time, as Mr. Maheshwari also said, it does take time to sort of put things in place, but I really hope that is resolved. And somewhere, because this question is asked specifically, I feel, and this is a completely different point, but my personal belief is that we should revisit our criminal laws when it comes to controlling freedom of speech and expression, right? If there is an issue, if I'm violating, certain principles, or 19(2) of Constitution does recognize that my freedom can be curtailed under those grounds, does not necessarily mean that everything should be criminalized. The way we are revisiting the laws, like companies or law, even legal metrology or otherwise, people are decriminalizing. I feel that this aspect also should be decriminalized, and we have to look at the entire system holistically, because you have not seen any real impact of criminalizing something, right? What you really want to get is some sense in the manner in which maybe certain thought process is put across, right? And if you that there has to be a dialogue. I mean, even if you remember in olden days, maybe ancient days, there used to be debates amongst intellectuals, right? It is not, so you will have a point of view, so debate it out, have a healthy discussion, but don't file FIRs and don't run to courts, etc. So I feel the entire society has to look at it differently. And if we do that, these regulations that have put in place, of course there may be some little opinion difference here and there, but the intention of those regulations should be respected. And then in that context, everybody has to work together to sort of make use of these regulations, so that these uncertainties that Tarun even earlier mentioned are sort of put to test. I hope that answers the question of the audience.
No, absolutely. I think that was very well put. And I think one of the key takeaways from that on OTT, very interestingly, Gauri, is that decriminalize. I think that's very important. It's a very, very important point you've made. And that will also deter irrelevant, frivolous FIRs being filed for vested interests. I think that's most of what happens. And I correct myself. I didn't mean to say that most of this action comes from the regulator. I really meant to, thanks for correcting me. It's more a lot of these vested interests. So if their hands are tied with respect to what actions they can take, and only genuine actions come to the fore, I think that would make the the OTT landscape a much fairer and easier one to deal with from a regulatory perspective. We have, I think, Mihir, about 10 minutes till the clock. We still have one subtopic to touch upon, and I am going to, if Josefa has joined us, I'm going to ask him. It's actually segues well from intermediary to OTT to e-commerce, because I think even as Tarun pointed out, there's a lot of OTT and e-commerce itself has a lot of commonalities, both in business models as well as what's happening globally and India. So Josefa, if you're here with us, I can't see you on my screen, but could you briefly tell us what's happening in the e-commerce world in India? What are some of the newer business models that you're seeing?
Absolutely. Thanks, Vivek. I think this perfectly segues, right? Because intermediaries, OTTs kind of overlap in some models of e-commerce as well. Traditionally, we understood commerce just meant as buying and selling of goods. Then came, the nomenclature, the term e-commerce, which essentially was meant buying and selling of goods on a digital network, which essentially meant that the network just facilitated the transaction which happened offline. But of course, the way we are moving forward is that electronic commerce is a blend of offline as well as online, because today you get goods and services which are digital in nature as well, OTT being a classic example. So, moving from the more traditional business to business online commerce sites or the more traditional, business to consumer sites such as the marketplaces of the likes of the Amazons and the Alibabas and the Flipkart, we've actually moved on. We have actually got more industry centric. We have got organic verticals within the e-commerce vertical. C2C, which is consumer to consumer platforms, are a classic example of an organic growth, which means that Indian consumers come to a particular platform and the target audience itself is a consumer. Within that, it's not necessary that the platform needs to actually be a commerce platform. There is a little bit of an overlap in terms of it being classified as a listing or a classified daily or an ad platform. Quicker OLX are classic examples. We've also got the consumer to business platforms, which have also really helped individuals specifically during this lockdown, where platforms specifically more for services, not so much for goods, are facilitating independent consumers to go online, showcase their developing skills, or web designers, so forth and so on, and they're actually being picked up by businesses. Platforms such as Design Hill and Indiefolio are classic examples. Within that vertical as well, Vivek, I'll just take a couple of examples.
Sure.
There have been industry segments as well. Hospitality is a classic disruption model which has happened, whereby the likes of Airbnb and Oyo have penetrated, because it's nothing. It's a form of commerce. It's a different form of commerce, but it is a digital platform which is facilitating a transaction. The food space again is another disruption which has aided a lot of industries and a lot of people in this lockdown, thanks to the likes of Zomato, Swiggy, and Dunzo. So this is a broad gamut, a high-level picture of commerce. But I just want to take a couple of minutes that the support functions which various verticals offer in the commerce space are equally important now, because with commerce changing, the models of commerce changing, there has been a lot of disruption at the back end. And I'll take three key examples here. The first is the entire payment space. To support any form of commerce, there has to be a robust backend payment integration with commerce. Traditionally, it was cash on delivery, debit card, credit card, net banking. Then bingo came UPI, which has boosted a lot of digital payments. Then, more recently, we have variants of reward points, loyalty cards, cash cards, so forth and so on. Now, all of these get very interesting because they kind of get regulated differently. Specifically, with the internet, commerce has also opened cross-border. So the models which I mentioned, there is a high possibility that the buyer could be in India, but the merchant could be abroad, and vice versa. So why, I want to lay a little bit of emphasis on the payment model is because from a cross-border perspective, how do you kind of end up setting up your platform in terms of accepting rupees when there is foreign exchange contemplated, or when there is foreign exchange coming into India? So all of that gets really interesting. The second one is, traditionally for any online e-commerce, whether it's mobile or your traditional e-commerce, web hosting sites played a very important role. But web hosting sites historically meant for somebody who just keeps the website running. But now that itself has radically changed. We have got companies which actually offer the entire suite of services, whereby MSME or a Kirana store, or a normal vendor can actually move online. Shopify being a classic example. And the last bit, and I understand the paucity of time, so I'll close here, is the evolution of social media. We did speak about it a little bit from an intermediary perspective earlier, but the uses of the users on social media are also using social media interestingly, whereby they are kind of displaying certain home baked goods, or there are home bakers, there are information which is shared in terms of social media. So that itself has become a very interesting vertical, which kind of has direct linkages to the overall ecosystem. Over to you, Vivek.
So thanks so much, Josefa, and thanks for that was very lucid, crisp in the short amount of time you had I think one takeaway from that is that there is growing convergence in a lot of these business models. And I think you being the leader of the disruptive technologies practice, you're going to be very, very busy because it seems that everything is getting disrupted. And so thanks for that, Josefa. Mihir,
Yeah,
I know we're on the clock.
I'm not complaining on the disruption. Sorry, go ahead, Mihir.
No, not at all, not at all. We're
The
live
more
on
disruption, the better it is, right?
whatever
We
it
get
is.
to see the new stuff.
Yes. So
So
I'd
thank
like to
you,
quickly
Vivek.
thank, yeah, I'd like to quickly thank the panelists and hand it over to you, Mihir.
Of course. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mihir.
Okay.
Up to
No,
you.
thank you, Vivek. This has been a great session, very interesting discussion about the intent of government and the implementation aspects and some good suggestions about that, and then discussion on different platforms. So it was very fascinating to hear about all this from you all expert. I'm sure audience must have enjoyed it too. So thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Gauri, Tarun, Mr. Maheshwari, and especially Josefa. I know you have an emergency situation, and I love your dedication to even join us, even despite the emergency. But especially appreciate you being here. Mukesh, I can't share my screen. If you would allow me to share the screen, please. So, continuing the discussion, we have applied for MCLE credit with the State Bar of California in New York. So, if you would like to receive credit for MCLE or CLE for this session, please write to linet.h@nishiddesai.com. And when you write, please use this code 94306. That is again 94306. Next panel that we have coming up, again, another very interesting panel, which is on data ownership and protection, which is supported by FICCI. So I look forward to seeing you at that panel. So now you can go and meet speakers in the breakout rooms, especially assigned for speaker. And for the next session, please return to virtual lobby and refresh your page before you join the next session. So thank you again for joining us today, and wish you all the best. Anything else we can do to help, please let us know. And we continue to have this conference for another 2 days after today. So hope to see you again there. So thank you again, everybody on the panel and the speakers and the audience. Bye-bye.